I don't know how I'm going to follow that. John is right. I have had feedback in the past that I do speak too quickly. Yeah. There was a listener to Radio 4 on the BBC who complained previously, and she said, Dr. McCartney is very good, but I have to record her and then play her back at half the speed. But my general position is that we're all going to die, and I have a lot to say first. So, go. All right. So, well, listen, thank you for having me. It's a huge privilege to be here. This is like the Glastonbury of evidence-based medicine, so thank you. We discussed this session. Was I going to be optimistic, pessimistic, or realistic? After the two talks previously, I'm going to try and be sensible. But here are my conflicts of interest. I'm a GP partner, an academic now, tiny academic job at St Andrews, who've been amazing to me. I've given money to NHS campaign groups. I'm a director of Barriers Place, a women-only support centre for rape and sexual assault in Edinburgh. I'm applying for grants in these areas, and they're all up at whopaysthisdoctor.org. So this is how I feel. I'm sorry, I need to go and speak to the heron. We have an average of 3 or 4 problems in 12 minutes. We have IT systems that don't work. Secondary care have waiting lists of 18 months. And we have discontinuity of care all over the place. We have conflicts of interest at every turn. We have this industrial healthcare model, this linear pool that Julian was talking about. You know, you got to get on a guideline. How do you get off that guideline? And what my job a lot of the time feels to be is to try and stop malign external agencies affecting the consultation. And here's one. This is Matt Hancock, our previous health secretary, who was regularly on social media during his tenure telling people to go onto the NHS website and to score their heart risk. What is their heart age? Could they be healthier? And he was saying that it was out by a month, so he had to do more exercise. So he'd effectively overdiagnosed himself because he doesn't understand basic statistics, and then sent in hundreds of patients into primary care to try and sort this out. This is our health secretary, who incidentally did a major promotion of Babylon. I'm going to slow down. Okay, who did a major promotion of Babylon? The IT digital first company who basically crashed and burned. They had this terrific idea that you didn't need to see a doctor at all. You could be triaged entirely by artificial intelligence. And what do you know? It didn't work. And then, of course, we had the whole fiasco of screening people asymptomatically in the population with lateral flow tests. So very popular. The government going, I want some of that, and everyone else going, you what? And we never really had a proper discussion about that at the end of the day. So at the moment, we've got primetime Radio 4 in the morning on the news programme, having men on who believe their life has been saved by a PSA screening test. And we have got this organisation called Prostate Cancer UK, who are a charity, who are advertising their risk checker, and they're asking every man in the UK to do their risk checker, which basically says that if you're over 50, you should go and speak to your doctor about a PSA test. And so men will come in and they will say, I have looked at this, I'm at risk. Prostate Cancer UK have told me that I have a right, an entitlement to this test. And of course, the prostate cancer charities say that if you've thought carefully about it, I have looked carefully on their website for a shared decision aid that's been independently verified. And what do you know? I couldn't find one. So we have a gentleman that comes in into the surgery who believes that his life will only be saved, or will be saved or could be saved through getting this test done. Immediately the consultation starts off on a note that I would have not started from. And our position then becomes one of defensiveness, which is a horrible place to be in, because I want to start a collaborative, shared decision-making journey with that patient, and I'm starting off from a position of saying, can we just take a minute? And that's a really difficult place to start from. Fortunately, in the UK, we do have some sensible agencies. For example, the UK National Screening Committee, who have, of course, said specifically that GPs should not raise the prospect of PSA screening with men spontaneously. We shouldn't do that. So they have said that, and they've also said that we should not screen for atrial fibrillation. This is in red, it's clear, it's written down. They've done an evidence-based assessment of the situation. They've said, going to not stop, going to not do atrial fibrillation screening. And yet, in the UK, we seem to be doing a hell of a lot of screening for atrial fibrillation. We notice this everywhere across the media, huge promotion for screening for atrial fibrillation. So myself, Mary O'Keefe was on this, and a bunch of medical students. We looked at media coverage of atrial fibrillation screening in the UK press over a couple of years. And we found overwhelming commentary to say that AF screening was beneficial. So it was very rare, actually, to find a piece that provided a balanced view of atrial fibrillation screening, or even a view that was negative about it. And I have to say that most of those I'd given a quote to. So this overwhelming picture in the media was that atrial fibrillation screening was beneficial, even though the UK National Screening Committee had said not to do it. Then we looked at the commentators, and we looked at their conflicts of interest. And almost always, the commentators who were positive about atrial fibrillation screening had a financial conflict of interest, either directly with the drug company or through their employment, or through a charity that was receiving funding from pharma. In other words, the information was not independent that was getting into the press. And then we looked to see whether or not those conflicts were made clear in the press articles. And what do you know? They almost always were not. How's a GP meant to deal with that? The problem is that this was embedded into the NHS through these things called academic health science networks, which, in my view, were set up in order to avoid the scrutiny of the UK National Screening Committee and to avoid the scrutiny of NICE, and instead to put in these kind of interventions into primary care under the guise of innovation. So you'll see that drug companies partnered directly with NHS organisations and started to offer screening for atrial fibrillation. This got so bad that they had the fire and rescue service in Cheshire offering well-being and safety checks for people in their homes that was meant to be about fire safety, but ended up bringing in an AliveCor atrial fibrillation detection machine. This is the fire service screening patients for atrial fibrillation when they're meant to be doing a fire safety check in their own home. Don't laugh. And then we had pharmacists who got AliveCor machines who were being encouraged to, not just for patients picking up their prescriptions, but for patients going in looking for lipstick, who knows, in the pharmacy to do screening for atrial fibrillation at the same time to improve the heat map of atrial fibrillation detection in the UK. And if you go on their website, they will tell you how many lives and strokes have been saved through this non-evidence-based intervention. The other area that I'm really worried about, where people come in and they've got an expectation of treatment, is in gender dysphoria, particularly for young people, particularly for young women. And you'll see this is the referral graph for GIDS, the Gender Identity Development Service, which is in London. And you'll see that referrals have just gone up and up and up. And this is the NHS England specification, which makes a particular point of saying that it's an affirmative approach that's taken by psychologists. This really worries me, because whenever a young person comes in great distress about their body over my career, I have wanted to find out why that is and to understand what's going on. I have not affirmed the situation, and I have not immediately referred them. And I have to say, I'm really confused as to why the overdiagnosis community has not taken a greater interest in this, because I fear that we've seen the massive overdiagnosis of young people in real time, to many young people's great distress when they go on to take hormonal or medical or surgical interventions and later regret it. And I think we're missing we have a blind spot, I think, I'm sorry to say about that, because it's so difficult and controversial in many ways, but that doesn't stop the fact that there are many young people who talk very deeply about how they weren't taken seriously by doctors who didn't explore alternatives with them. So basically we're in a mess, in my view. We're tangled up by the time patients come into the surgery with their problems. How do we start to untangle that? Well, one area I've been trying to look at in more detail is that of conflicts of interest reporting and managing. So this is a study that's just been published in BMJ Open, when we asked famous doctors to let us study their conflicts of interest. And we did get some famous doctors who were willing to do that. So these are doctors who would normally be giving advice to the population. So big names, people who you might see on your TV or read information that they've written in the press. And we asked them to take part in our study. We said to them, okay, we're going to try and find your conflicts of interest online, and we're going to make this as our gold standard, and then we'd like you to check it for us. So we did that, so we had their conflicts of interest, and then we asked people online, about 350 people online, can you find one of these doctors' conflicts of interest? And almost always people could not find their conflicts of interest. And then we interviewed lay people and asked them what they understood by it. And basically we found that lay people wanted to know about people's conflicts of interest. They were concerned about them, but they didn't understand what to do with these conflicts once they had found them. They didn't understand how to interpret that or to use it. So what we've basically said is we need to stop talking about individual declarations of interest and actually start talking about system issues. How can we make the system better so that people don't end up in a newspaper promoting atrial fibrillation screening without us knowing about their conflicts of interest? How can we start discussing with the prostate cancer charities that they shouldn't be allowed to make these massive sweeping statements about all men needing to discuss their PSA test with their GP and sending them into us? We should start dealing with the problem where it's happening rather than downstream when the patient's actually coming in to see us. So I do think system solutions have to be a massive part of the answer here. We can't possibly ask GPs to start sorting this out. We need to be thinking about it on a system level. So whenever I get someone that's interested in the overdiagnosis stuff and they say, well, what can I do? I'm saying to them, well, join a committee, any committee, anything. Just try and get your voice heard further upstream, because the more people that are raising these issues from primary care, telling people about the problems they're having, hopefully the more we'll realise, actually, this needs to be done on a bigger level, an umbrella, not just leaving it to individual doctors who are already stressed and distressed in their practice day to day. Especially in management, if there were more doctors interested in overdiagnosis and overtreatment on the boards of these academic health science networks, for example, surely that would be better for us. Surely then that would allow us a bigger grasp of, why did they not understand that this is a big issue? Why are they not following the guidance of the UK National Screening Committee and actually getting our voice heard further up? Academia, obviously, massive amount of work that's been done so far. And I really feel that there's a huge amount that academia has to offer. Practical tools like Julian's done, for example. We've made a tool called Our Health, Our Knowledge, which is designed for patients to use and lay people and carers, which is basically an overview of evidence-based medicine for citizens. And it's done in layers so that you can do the basic level of just kind of an overview, or you can get more detailed information. Will it help? Will it make a difference? Realistically, probably not. It's probably only the most interested people that are going to do this. I think it's good there's a resource there for them, but that doesn't really get around the problem that we have in primary care, which is that it's so difficult to do this stuff in real life practice. The media, well, I've been writing and broadcasting for the media for the last 20 years. Radio 4 ran this thing about PSA screening on the Today programme, which is the biggest listenership on the whole week of Radio 4. I literally work in the same building as these people. And upstairs in Inside Health on Radio 4, we've been talking about the problems with PSA screening for years. If we can't do something in the same building, what hope do we have? So I feel, I have to say, very gloomy after having spent so much time and effort trying to improve this. I have made almost zero difference overall, and I don't know what to do about that. And probably we need to think about ways, and I know that there have been attempts made in the US with Stephen, to try and get people with less conflicts into the media being quoted more often. And I know that particularly women don't always put themselves forward as experts, and quite often GPs don't think of themselves as experts or, good enough to be in print or to give a comment. Give a comment. If you don't have a conflict of interest, get your voice heard. Don't say somebody else is better than me. Just go and do it. I think we have to take conflicts of interest much more seriously in the UK in particular, which is descending into, well, let's not go there, but I think that we've allowed in commercial conflicts of interest. We've allowed pharmaceutical companies in. We've seen with Wegovy. We're allowing companies to go in and start to design services for obesity management. I mean, to me, this is absolutely insane. Why would we do this? It's good to have a respectful relationship with people working in the same area, but it's bad to let someone else set the terms and conditions and framework of what you're doing. We don't take things well enough. BMJ, Helen McDonald's obviously here, which is fantastic. We had a recent series of a few things in the BMJ in the last couple of weeks, including conflicts of interest in major committees that you might want to have a look at. There's also a podcast that I made with Chris and Zand van Tuliken talking about, the £100,000 that one of them was offered for promoting screening blood tests. Now, you would have to be quite a principled media doctor, I think, to say no to that. But if we've got journalists journalists that are looking for commentators who don't have conflicts of interest, perhaps that will turn the tide. So I think we need to be talking to journalisms more. What will really help, though, is collegiality, how wonderful it is to be here with other people that are working in these areas and to draw strength from that. I think that's really important. And also the curriculum. Can we get young doctors in and say to them, look, you know, these problems are really important, they're not going to go away, and perhaps we need to put this right into the curriculum from day one. You know, maybe that will make a difference as well, I don't know. Certainly postgraduate level, doctors are really interested in this and want to know more about it. So I think we can possibly move away from a situation of chaotic evil, which is where I think we are just now, certainly in the UK. I'm not sure whether we can move, this is for Dungeons and Dragons fans, I'm not sure whether we can move truly into lawful good, but I think we can possibly try and mitigate some of the chaos that we've got in our medical systems just now through good system use. But whether or not we can put in the good values of, you know, healthcare that's designed around patients, that's got as few conflicts of interest as possible, I don't know. But I think we need to be pushing from all angles. So I asked my children how many photographs of cycling-related activities I could have in my slideshow, and they said 0. So I'm sorry for this, but this is Copenhagen. You have bicycles everywhere. I love it. So I'm not going to talk much about cycling, but this summer I did a really big cycle across France. And on the way down the Tourmalet climb, there is a statue of Eugene Christophe. And I don't know if you know the story of Eugene Christophe, but he was leading in the Tour de France. He was leading all the way down. And on the bottom of the climb almost, his forks at the top of his bike, they came apart. And the rules in those days was that no one could assist you. You had to do it on your own. So he went to the blacksmith's forgery and he welded his forks back together again. And because he allowed a young boy to help him blow up his tire or blow the bellows, he was penalised 10 minutes. And he ended up coming 7th, having led all the way. So he worked on his own. It was really difficult, and he didn't come first. Whereas we've just had the UCI Championships in Glasgow, and this is the Crow Road climb, which is quite famous, and they are amazing. They work in teams. So they've got a team of 4. They've got their leader. They're in behind them. They're saving their energy. They have got people at the side of the road giving them snacks and healthy treats. It is phenomenal. And they're working together as a team, and they are going at such pace. It is incredible. It's like a force of nature. These guys coming down, they're coming up the hill. They are unbelievable. The energy and the power that they have when working together as a group is phenomenal. So my only advice here to say is join a peloton. Let's get in a peloton and work together. And hopefully, if we're all working in different areas, we can bring primary care that strength and that vigour that we need, in order to try and keep our patients from overdiagnosis and overtreatment. Thank you.